I can do this. You don't know them, but I know them. And they're counting on me to make a good investment out of their money. So I'm going to keep trying on these hard days. I'm not going to give up and quit when I feel like it. And so my advisor allowed me the freedom, because I had those fellowships, to pursue my own research interests instead of working on his projects. And I said, we have this whole comprehensive cancer center at UAB. I'm going to find somebody who will give me space or a chance to work in their lab and train me on some of the techniques that I don't know how to do. And even though my PhD is purely in physics, I spent 5 years at the Comprehensive Cancer Center training under a guy who is now the director of the Comprehensive Cancer Center at Stanford University. So these are things, initially, when he said, my technicians work for me. My staff, they work for me. They can show you something one time. You are a guest in my lab. You can use the resources. We're here to support you. But I had to become a fast learner. And I spent a lot of evenings and a lot of weekends missing birthdays, holidays, special occasions, trying to get this to happen when I wasn't in the way. There wasn't grant money set aside for me to pursue this. And I felt like the stepchild in everybody's lab, because I'm a physics major in the cancer center doing most of this work. And I'm having to learn how to do cell culture. And I'll tell you, side note, I went to this conference in Greece, and this guy asked me what I was doing, and I was in the middle of all the stress, and I'm like, well, I'm having to do everything from A to Z. He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, I'm making all the nanoparticles, I'm doing all the cell cultures, all the animal studies, I'm doing all the conjugations of the nanoparticles to the antibodies, and from A to Z, from making the nanoparticles to injecting them into the mice, exciting them with the laser, and doing the therapy, the photothermal therapy. And he said, don't be discouraged. When I was in graduate school, I had an experience that was very similar to that. Now I'm the director of the Center of Nanobiotechnology for all of Ireland.
Woo woo!
What I didn't know was that he was the judge for the poster competition the next day, and I ended up winning first place in the poster competition. And it was my first time winning an international award. And so, like, just being put in the right place at the right time, and I didn't know, I was just venting at the time, but what he saw was the skill set that I had developed. And he said, after the poster competition, that I have a very specific skill set that a lot of people, especially physicists, don't have. Always use that to my advantage. So the advantage now is to help people. I'm not a selfish, put myself first type thinker. I wasn't raised like that. My goal is to take the treatment that I've developed and help people. So leaving Tuskegee, a lot of the headline news was me at Tuskegee University. I just started at Morehouse School of Medicine on Monday to pursue my dream to help people with the treatment that I've developed. So when I finally got it to work, we filed the patent, provisional patent application, a full patent application, and the University of Alabama got a new president who said, any technology that might not be commercialized within 2 years, turn it back over to the inventors. Now I have to raise the money to pay for this patent myself so that I can maintain the control over it without the pharmaceutical company buying it and putting it on the shelf so that it never sees the light of day. So the message that I'm getting out, trying to get out, is twofold. This is something that the community can own, that's ours. And it's also something that can be a viable alternative to chemotherapy and radiation. The treatments that I developed are minimally invasive, using lasers and nanotechnology. And simply put, these little bitty particles heat up and they provide a very local, specific treatment to just the tumor and not the whole body. I intentionally designed it so that it is not cancer type specific, but if it's a solid tumor, whether it's the primary location or the secondary location, which includes metastasis, it should work. So the recent grant that I received will help me further develop that, but it won't pay for patent attorney fees and those type of things. So it's an honor and a privilege. I think I'm right around the 10-minute mark to be here and to share my story and to share my testimony. And I am happy to receive more questions. Thank you.
Woo woo! You ever heard the song, This Is My Story? This is my song. Praise
my Savior all the day long.
All right.
So, wow. My thoughts are, at this point, I want to have a breakout session, have a meeting with my brother over there, Sean Trotter, to talk to our sister over here about how we can get a small business innovative research grant for you, SBIR.
All right.
And you just happen to be in the room of the Illinois Medical District, where we have innovative research, where we have a lot of think tanks going on. And it just so happens that the executive director of Illinois Medical District is sitting in the room too. So I think you're in the right place at the right time to get exactly what you need. To get exactly what you need. And this past Saturday, I had the privilege of being honored by the Metropolitan Chicago Breast Cancer Task Force as a community change agent for breast cancer. And when I was giving my remarks, I opened up by saying that I feel like my life is the amen to prayers that were prayed long before me. It's not that I prayed those prayers. I prayed a lot, but I understand very clearly that I'm standing on the shoulders and living on the blessings and living on the prayers of people that went long before me. And I'm so excited that a little black girl from St. Louis can sit next to a little black boy from Muskegon Heights, Michigan, a very similar town, who was raised by a father from Arkansas, Wheatley, Arkansas. And you think about the prayers that that father prayed, and your parents prayed, and your uncle and aunt and grandparents prayed for us to be able to do what we do. And I also think that what I've been able to do, I also don't do as a single scientist or a single researcher. I do built on the legacy of African American geneticists like Dr. Rick Hills. I do it built on the legacy of our very own Cancer Center director, the first African American Cancer Center director in the country, Dr. Robert Wynn. And when I think about the narrative that exists in society today about African American men, there was a recent report that came out that talked about unemployment in African American men in Chicago, and it talked about violence in African American men in Chicago. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that there was a plot out against African American men until I went to college. And because I grew up in a small town in Muskegon Heights, Michigan, where I came home every day and my father was black. I went to church every Sunday and Wednesday and Friday, and that's what we did back then. You know, you grew up Kojic and Apostolic, you lived in church. And so, you know, every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, my preacher was black. And, you know, twice a year, I went to an African American doctor as a primary care. And then twice every 6 months, I went and got my teeth cleaned by African American dentists. So I didn't grow up seeing this deficit. We didn't have a lot, but I didn't grow up seeing this deficit of leadership. And I went to college and they kept talking about this missing black man. I was like, well, we right here. But then I began to think about why I was there and the sacrifices that had taken place. Very similar stories. And Brother Shine, I hope we can find a way to talk about the similarities and the stories of those of us who get a chance to sit in these seats, even with Dr. McKinney. And we all share these similar experiences and how we got to where we are and the sacrifices that others made for us to get there. So the reason that I say that my life is the amen to prayers that went long before me, imagine what happens when an 8-year-old boy loses his mother from breast cancer, right? Imagine what that's like. And I remember being that 8-year-old boy whose mother died of breast cancer. That 8-year-old boy then gets surrounded and loved by sisters who step in and say, there won't be a gap, there won't be a deficit in your life. And they were absolutely right. There was not one. It was an abundance of love. But then imagine that 8-year-old boy now turns into a 19-year-old young man, and he gets a call, and the father, who's been a rock for him, is now diagnosed with colon cancer. And coupled with his diabetes, this was not looking well for him, right? But he had learned some things from watching his wife die from breast cancer. He had learned the secret to early detection. So we caught his colon cancer early, so my father went on to live for 10 more years after that, right? But complications from diabetes, coupled with the colon cancer surgery, my father ended up dying later on from complications from colon cancer, coupled with diabetes. So then you take that 19-year-old boy who experiences these different losses, but who's been taught that there's not a deficit in your life, that everything has to be turned into an asset, right? All things work together for the good, right? And so when I began to look at my family situation, these calls kept coming. The calls later on were my brother, who was 49 years old at the time, needed a kidney transplant. And when we went to go get tested to become kidney transplant, that's when we began to realize that diabetes was rampant in our family. And so many of us didn't qualify to be living donors. So my brother had to fortunately, he was blessed to get a kidney donor, and he's still alive today. But the last call that I got 6 months ago, my brother's been diagnosed with colon cancer. I'm tired of getting calls. So I do the work that I do because I'm tired of getting the calls. I was tired of getting the call after I completed my graduate work here at UIC, and I was doing a breast cancer screening program called Pin a Sister, where we're using the faith-based model, using the church as the vehicle to have women, African-American women and Latina women, stand up and take a stand and say, I commit to get my screening mammogram. I was doing it at the Apostolic Faith Church one Sunday, one Mother's Day, and I looked down the row, and my sisters were there because it was Mother's Day, because they celebrate with me, because remember, I'm their baby. And so I looked down the row and I asked my oldest sister, did you get your mammogram? And she said, no, we've been so busy taking care of Dad, who had just died, that I didn't get my mammogram this year. I said, well, you got to practice what I preach. So I need you to go get your mammogram. She went and stage 1 cancer, right? So what you're hearing, though, is that when you think about the outcomes of my life, losing a father and a mother both to cancer, but then I look at my nephew, who still has my sister, his mother. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, but he still has her because of early detection. When I look at my other nephew, who was a football player at Ferris State at the time, he still has my sister because, he still has his dad because of early detection for colon cancer. So when you take these experiences, and so you took your experiences and took them to the lab, I took my experience and took them directly to the community. I said, how can I create screening and navigation programs right in these very 4 walls of Miles Square Health Center that can ensure that people have outcomes like my brother and sister, not my mother and my father. And so we've been able to do that, as you said earlier, step by step by step. We're not at 95th Street yet, but we're closer. We're one step closer than where we were. When we first started this program here at Miles Square, we were at 12.7% for our colorectal cancer screening rate. We're now above 40%.
Woo.
Some of our sites even above 50%. That's all due to the hard work of another Brown sister who's going to go get her PhD to sit in that back row back there. And I believe that all things happen in divine order, because as she hears your story, Dr. Green, what you don't know is that she's been told so many times what she can't do. She's a neighborhood epidemiologist. She wants to build community navigation based on the community area that she grew up in, where she saw the navigation. So when she goes to our back of the yard clinic and she says, Kareem, this is not right, I look at the outcomes of this community clinic versus look at the outcomes of this community clinic, and I can see effect modifiers based on neighborhood, based on race and ethnicity. And I want to be able to build screening navigation programs to impact that. And people say, that's not truly epidemiology. But she's getting ready to go to San Diego and go into a PhD program where she'll become Dr. San Miguel, and to be able to do this and sit in these very seats and hopefully tell some other people that yes, you can. So when you hear those no's, I hope that your story has inspired her to say that I can do it. She may not be able to do it in the lab that she thinks, but there may be somebody right next door that will allow her to do her story. And so I just want us to say, hope we hear today that this is a continuing thing going on. We all started off as STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I was in a pipeline program sponsored by the Urban League called the New Lights, the National Urban League and Centers to Excel and Succeed. I remember it, and that was over 30 years ago. And I remember being an 8-year-old in that program. And I remember that program telling me that I could do, they didn't use the word community engagement, they actually used the word advocacy. Someone told me that you can do advocacy and science. And I was crazy enough to believe them. And now every day, I'm crazy enough to believe that I can do engagement and science to make sure that we're thinking about genetic counseling and genetic testing for breast cancer survivors so that their family members will know, what test do I need? Because I was able to go and get that counseling and that genetic testing to see, do I need to get a colonoscopy before 50? And the answer was, yes, you do. Yes, you do. And my doctor at Northwestern came up with a treatment plan for me, saying that I need to get screened every 5 years based on my family history. But I only knew that because I had access, awareness, health literacy, and internal navigation. So for those who don't have internal navigation, they need us to externally help navigate them. So with that, I will say thank you, and I hope you continue to share this story, and I hope you all continue to see the importance of opening up the doors for little black girls, little brown boys, and little brown girls to do the type of work that we've been born to do.
Moving right along.
Okay, well, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physicist, I am a 12-year colorectal cancer survivor. And I was diagnosed at 36 years old. Never knew that I had a family history because I didn't know my father's side of the family. And I have what's called Lynch syndrome, which is a genetic link to colorectal cancer. But my story is a little bit tragic in a sense that happens a lot in minority communities, is that I did not fit the bill for colon cancer, so I was misdiagnosed for 6 months. I wind up having my lady parts removed because, oh, you have fibroid tumor, so let's go ahead and let's take that, and that should be, we found cancer